Society Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Dr. Susanne Seperson, and this is our 5th episode of the podcast, Antisemitism in the United Nations and in Society on HMTV. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend and Assemblyman Charles Lavine, who represents the 13th Assembly District in New York State. What prompted me to invite him today was a newsletter that I received, and in it there was a lovely photo and a description that said Assemblyman Lavine is president of the New York chapter of the National Association of Jewish Legislators and a member of its National Board of Directors. I had not known about this group and want to know more, especially since there's been such an increase in anti-Semitism in New York, the United States, and throughout the world. So I am so pleased and grateful that you've agreed to join us for a conversation about anti-Semitism and your work fighting it. So welcome, Chuck, and let's start with some questions about your background.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, and I was born in a small town in northern Wisconsin, and then lived in a couple of other small towns in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, then back to Wisconsin, and eventually my parents ended up living in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which was a great place.
Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, I read your bio before we got here, and it said you grew up in rural Marinette. And I said, I have never heard of Marinette, Wisconsin. So I'd like to ask you, what was it like being a Jewish person in a small town in northern Wisconsin in Marinette?
So I think it helps to sort of describe the history of how it happened that Jews ended up throughout the entire West and the Midwest. So the economy in the upper Midwest was very strong and booming at the turn of the previous century. Now we're talking about the late 1800s into the early 1900s. So anyone who came to the United States from any of the foreign nations ended up in the upper Midwest. So I grew up, we were sort of the vestigial remnant of what had once been a large Jewish population, but also, in addition to Jews, there were Greeks, Syrians, Lebanese, Italians, in addition to Finns and Swedes and Germans and Poles. So it was a very interesting conglomerate of all different types of cultures.
That's really interesting because, today, I hate to say this, the stereotype is that the Midwest is not as diverse as you describe it. So that's actually fascinating. So what brought you to New York and particularly to Glen Cove?
Well, I was very fortunate to graduate from a high school in Wisconsin. And if we were in the top 2/3 of our graduating class, we could choose to go to any of the public universities in the state of Wisconsin. So I went to the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and and by the way, my tuition as an in-state student was then $125 a semester.
Oh, wow.
And I met a nice young woman from Long Island whose tuition as an out-of-state student was $525 a semester, and we dated, and when we graduated, Ronnie said she was going back to New York. She really didn't much care what happened to me, but I followed her back here, and we've been married for nearly 55 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations. Well, I have a similar story because I graduated from SUNY Binghamton, which was then Harper, and the tuition was $400 a year for an in-stater, but I had a Regents scholarship, so my tuition was $0.
Even better.
So, what can I say? That's a whole separate discussion on the cost of higher education, let alone, which we will get to, what's going on in the schools of higher education. So I was very pleased to receive your newsletter, which told me that you are the president of the New York chapter of Jewish legislators, and you are on the national board of the National Association of Jewish Legislators. So could you tell me about your work? with that organization nationally and locally? Because, as I said, I had not heard of it.
So the organization itself has been around for more than 30 years. And it was originally established so that there would be an alliance, a relationship between state legislators who are Jewish throughout the United States. And the initial reason had to do with reparations from Germany for Holocaust survivors. So every state that had Holocaust survivors needed state legislation to enable the payment of the reparations. And so in the 30 years that it's been in existence, we remain a close-knit group of national state legislators and do our best to maintain communication and to stand against Jew hatred and stand as well for defense of the State of Israel.
Well, I'm very excited to learn that because both my parents were Holocaust survivors and received reparations. My mother was survived Auschwitz. My father was in the underground. But be that as it may, I'm very glad and thank you for that legislation.
And you know I adored your mom.
Thank you. And I have a background, I have a doctorate in sociology, so I'll say, well, okay, you accomplished that. So in theory, when an organization accomplishes its goals, it could disband, but they never do, never ever, and they find a new purpose. So given that the reparations problem, I assume, was solved for the most part, so what do you see as your mission now?
Well, our mission is to defend democracy. Almost every member of the National Association of Jewish Legislators stands for American democracy and to defend the State of Israel and stand for the State of Israel, and also to stand against what is today rampant anti-Semitism. And while it is certainly easier in a sense, for those of us who come from the major states, the complex states, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, Illinois, because we have a relationship with many Jews in our population. But there are Jewish legislators in Utah, in South Dakota, and they pretty much stand alone. And having us in their, so to speak, corner makes a real difference. So I'm very proud of what I've been able to help to accomplish with the National Association.
No, that's very interesting to hear, because in many ways, I think personally that what we have now is everything is identity politics. But what you're saying to me is this started a long time ago, and perhaps you were bound by identity, but it was a support system to deal with issues that are tearing us apart now, and is just very, very worrisome. And so I know you have a background in criminal law, if I remember correctly.
That's true.
So I'm just curious.
Well, as a defense attorney,
okay,
not as a principal.
Okay.
not as a defendant.
Okay, of course. So I'm just curious if you would be willing to share with me, with us, your views now on there's such lawlessness when it comes to anti-Semitism, and I'm going to speaking particularly about New York City. There doesn't seem to be any real prosecution, any meaningful. I just don't get it. I mean, and I would just be curious what your view of this is, because from my point of view, you hit somebody over the head and you call them a dirty Jew, you should be punished. But it doesn't always happen that way.
Well, it doesn't always happen that way, but we already have, and we do have criminal laws that are meant to serve as a vehicle to prosecute those people. So let me just mention a couple things about NAJL, the National Association of Jewish Legislators. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a traveling exhibit by End Jew Hatred. And it is a boxcar that is a replica of the boxcars that, cattle cars, that the Nazis used, Nazis and their allies, to transport the Jews. And it's an immersive experience. You go into the cattle car, and of course it becomes very crowded. The doors close and you hear that sound. and then broadcast on each of the walls, the interior walls of the cattle car, are depictions, videos of Jews who survived, families of those who did not survive. Very, very meaningful. I did want to make sure that I referenced that, because that we had a lot of people who attended. Now, in terms of anti-Semitism today, 2 years ago, the National Association hosted an event for all the members of the Assembly, and the person who spoke was Professor Stephen Burke, a graduate of Brooklyn College, who is now a leading authority on anti-Semitism in the United States and throughout the world, and he's at Union College. And he's done extensive research, and he's, by the way, a remarkable guy. And his research revealed that white supremacy, which is one of the great threats, white supremacy really gained steam once Obama was elected, and continued to gain steam. And I certainly condemn any one of my political colleagues, if we can call them colleagues, who foster white supremacy, and there are too many of them today. But so this white supremacy movement coincides with, or the development of it, the burgeoning of it, coincided with increases in anti-Semitic attacks, incidents, and statements over the course of all these many, many years. Now, let's face it, the United States today it has a national government that is in a state of chaos. It is close to anarchy. And as well, the President of the United States and some of our national leaders have broken bread with racists and with anti-Semites. Now, those aren't dog whistles. Those are foghorns. So we have to be aware of the fact that we have all these different component features that are contributing to intolerance and hatred. And it's not simply against us as Jews. It is against any marginalized group of people. So I think that's the overall context. But in terms of punishing people who commit crimes, I'm very pleased that New York State Governor Kathy Hochul, who happens to be a long-time friend, was able, and I helped, to ensure that in our recent budget from just a week and a half ago, we now have new punishments for people who wear masks in order to hide their identities while they commit crimes. So we are on the state level moving in the right direction. However, I would be a whole lot more pleased if we were moving in the right direction on the national level.
I appreciate what you're saying, and clearly on the political level, there'll be people who agree with you with 100%, 50%, or not at all, or moving in the other direction. So, but this is not about politics, because that's not where we're going, although clearly it is part of the discussion. So as far as dog whistles and chaos, I would just say from my perspective is that there are extremists on the right and the left, and by and large, the United States is a centrist country, and we, depending on the election, go a little right, a little left, but both sides have just gone to the extremes, in some cases at any rate. And this disturbs me greatly, because a house divided cannot stand, and I really see us as a house divided right now.
So, Susanne, I agree with you completely, and I don't come here, I don't occupy public office to please everyone, right. And which reminds me of something that the great Prime Minister Levi Eshkol used to say, and I'm not one for stereotypes or generalities, but in terms of arguing and debating, there is something Jewish about that. And Levi Eshkol used to say, he said, we Jews are a disputatious people. Argument is our nationality. And that is also part and parcel of, I think, what it means to be a real American.
I agree with you on that, but and from my end, I totally believe in discourse, but peaceful discourse, respectful discourse, and unfortunately, we don't always see that. But that really brings me to another question that I had thought about. In many ways, what I see going on right now is we're in the middle of a perfect storm. It's as if, just as we were before the Holocaust, I'm going to digress for a moment.
And don't make this too political.
Okay. Well, but my mom was a survivor of Auschwitz, and she was in a cattle car. And the only reason that she survived is she and her father jumped off the moving cattle car on its way to the death camp. So I think that's an amazing exhibit. I would love to know more about it. I would love to know if we could show it, because my other hat that I wear is I'm the chair of a UN NGO committee called End Antisemitism and Promote Peace. So I think that would be an amazing exhibit if we could coordinate that somehow.
I am sure we can.
Terrific, terrific. So I thank you for that. So let's move on to what I consider the perfect storm. We have, I'll call it chaos, lack of leadership at the university level, at the political level. I don't really hear the religious leaders speaking out as forcefully as they might. Cultural leaders, Hollywood, sports athletes. The social media is a disaster. It's like just all the negative influences are just coming together. So pick any place you want, but what do you think we can do to, utilizing the institutions that we have, what do you think should be done to combat anti-Semitism?
So I was quite involved, now it goes back about 3 years ago, when commencement speakers at the City University of New York Law School in Queens were overtly anti-Semitic. It is possible it is not only possible, it's reasonable to be critical of any government, including the State of Israel.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. But I listened to those remarks, and as someone who has experienced anti-Semitism up close and personal growing up, I know it when I see it. And that was anti-Semitic. So I had spoken with the Chancellor of the City University, Matos, and had several meetings with him. And I think I helped to contribute to the result today being that we don't have student commencement speakers in the city university system. However, these things still occur. There was a student at a high school on Long Island who also engaged in speech that made Jewish students and Jewish families extraordinarily uncomfortable. So interestingly enough, on the university level, the universities whose presidents immediately condemned October 7th were far less likely to have anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli manifest demonstrations and violence. The university presidents who equivocated, invited that sort of anarchy. So we have learned, and I think our universities are making strides today to make sure that people who engage in illegal conduct are reprimanded and punished, and that makes a big difference. However, I will share this with you, that I am concerned about academic freedom in general in our universities. We Jews, as marginalized people, will not do well going back to your parents' experience and the experience of everyone in my European family who didn't come to the United States perished in the Second World War and in the days before the Second World War in pogroms. We will be very unsafe if academic freedom is threatened.
I share your concerns, and I'm a retired academic. So,
I know that.
So freedom of speech is absolutely very important. But before we get into some of these other institutions, you said that you experienced anti-Semitism as a child. Would you be willing to share that with us?
Well, at one point, my younger brother and I were the only Jewish kids in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and even growing up in some of the small towns where there had once been larger Jewish populations, being on the outside meant that you were a target, and yes, so these are instances that I experienced in my own life.
And it's searing, whether it's physical violence or verbal violence. It's searing. Having experienced something like that, it is searing. So, but thank you. So let's go back to, let's say, social media, sports figures, Hollywood. What, if anything, do you think can be done to turn the tide, to say it's not cool to be an anti-Semite?
My personal belief is that anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, is just another form of racism. Now, there may be some Jews who don't want to believe that or accept that or even talk about that. But anytime anyone discriminates or intimidates or threatens or harms someone because they are a member of some group, whether it's ethnic, nationalistic, it doesn't matter. That is a form of racism. And my own personal belief, for what it's worth, and it's certainly worth something to me, I don't know if it's worth anything to anybody else, is that we as Jews need to stress that hatred towards us is hatred towards every other minority and marginalized group, whether it's hatred against a religion, hatred against people because they're from Poland or Uruguay. It doesn't much matter, and hatred against people who are lesbian, gay, bi, and trans. Because anytime you single out any small group for that sort of anger or hatred, there's danger. And I need more of my colleagues in government to adopt that sort of philosophy. Those of us who are privileged to be in positions of political authority, I'm not going to use the word power, political authority, agency, have a bully pulpit. And those of us who use that bully pulpit to encourage and foster hatred accomplish exactly that, because people in general will listen and they will do what leaders suggest they do. And even if they're not doing that consciously, a person in a position of real power who espouses hatred is going to end up causing more hatred. It's almost like a soup. Like when you're making a soup, if you put in too much salt, it's going to be too salty and everybody's going to complain. I mean, that's really sort of a little bit of a facetious analysis, but that's life.
Now, I hear you, and I happen to agree with you. I think, that and I have children now, thank God, and grandchildren, thank God.
Yes.
But I think the schools are remiss in not teaching how to disagree respectfully. There's a culture of rudeness that you end up not listening to the arguments, you're responding to the personality attacks. And I don't know how to change that.
On that subject, and I don't want to go too far astray, but we have now educated several generations of children who once were taught in school to be good citizens. And for at least the last 35 years or so, education has changed. Education, which was designed, American education designed to bring us together, to make us good citizens, over the course of the last decades, has devoted itself slavishly to teaching children how to take and pass tests. And while certainly accountability is important, I would prefer to go back to the days when our teachers had more latitude and could make sure that kids were instructed not only on how to be good citizens, but in civics as well, and in history. All of the Second World War
Chuck, if I may,
Oh,
because
sure.
the time is running, we're
You
going
can
to
shut
start.
me up. It's okay.
No, we're going to start with this in our part 2 because you've graciously agreed to do part 2. So let's end this within the time frame. So I turn to everyone and say thank you for tuning into this episode of Anti-Semitism in the United Nations and in Society on HMTV. I appreciate my guest, Assemblyman Charles Lavine, for sharing his insights on combating anti-Semitism. Be sure to subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. Until next time, make it our time. Take care and be well.